Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we continue with the Reign of Sekandar. When he returned from his pilgrimage, he bestowed gold on Nasra, enriching those who had been poor and obliged to find food by their own labors. Then he led his army to Jeddah, where he didn't stay long. The soldiers were set to work making ships and a number of boats in which the world conqueror and his armies set off for Egypt. The Egyptian king at the time was named Qaytun, and he possessed an unimaginably large army. When he heard that a victorious world conqueror was coming with a following wind from the shrine at Mecca, he set out with a large company of soldiers to welcome him, and took coins and slaves and crowns as presents for Sekandar, who was pleased to see him, and stayed in Egypt for a year until he and his troops were well rested. Andalusia was ruled over by a woman. She was wise, had innumerable troops at her disposal, and ruled in prosperity and happiness. The name of this generous and ambitious woman was Qaydafeh. She sought out a painter from the ranks of her soldiers, someone who could make an accurate likeness, and said to them, "Go to Sekandar, and see that you make no mention of my country or of me. Look carefully at him, see what his complexion is, examine his face and stature, and then paint me a full-length portrait of him." The painter heard her, and immediately mounted his horse, ready to carry out his sovereign's orders. As quick as a royal courier, he made his way from Andalusia to Egypt, and into the presence of Sekandar. He observed him when he gave audience and when he was in the saddle. Then he took paper and Chinese ink, and drew his portrait exactly as he was in real life, and returned to Andalusia. Qaydafeh was moved when she saw Sekandar's face, and sighed to herself, then hid the portrait away. Sekandar asked Qaytun, "Who is Qaydafeh's equal in the world?" And King Qaytun replied, "In all the earth there's no one of her glory and her worth, unless he were to read the muster rolls. No one could count the soldiers she controls. You won't find anyone in any land who has the wealth she's able to command, who has her dignity, her eloquence, her wisdom, goodness, and magnificence. She built from stone a wide and wondrous town, so strong no leopard's claws could tear it down. 4 parasangs in length, no man can measure its endless width, and if you ask for treasure, hers is uncountable. For years there's been talk in the world of this exalted queen." Sekandar summoned a scribe, and had a letter written on silk from Sekandar, the slayer of lions and conquerors of cities, to Qaydafeh, the wise, whose name is unequaled in glory. The letter opened by invoking God, who is generous and just, and who bestows prosperity on those who merit it, and continued, "I have not rushed into war with you, rather I have been weighing the reports of the splendor of your court. When they bring you this letter, may it enlighten your dark soul. Send tribute to me, and understand that you do not have the strength to oppose me. You are wise, so act with foresight, as a powerful and religious sovereign should. If you attempt any kind of trick against me, you will see nothing but adverse fortune come your way. You don't have to look far to learn this lesson. Consider what happened to Dara and 4. As soon as the ink had dried, the letter was sealed with musk. A quick messenger took the letter at Sekandar's command, and when Qaydafeh read it, she was astonished at its language. Her answer was as follows: "Praise be to him who created the earth, who has made you victorious over 4 of India, and over Dara, and over the nobles of Sind. Your victory over these warriors has made you willful. You have crowned yourself in victory, but how can you put me on their level? I am far greater than they were in far and in glory, in my armies and in my royal wealth. How can I submit to a Greek overlord, and how can you expect me to tremble with fear because of your threats? My armies number more than 1,000 men, and princes command every one of these armies. Who are you that you should boast in this way? Your defeat of Dara has made you the prince of braggarts." She placed her gold seal on the letter, and dispatched the minister, who rode like the wind. Sekandar read her letter, and then he had the trumpet sounded, and his army led out. They marched for a month until they reached the borders of Qaydafeh's lands. A king called Ferrand reigned there, a man possessed of an army and wealth, and successful in his life. His city was built to withstand war, and its walls were so high that cranes could not overfly them. He and his army occupied this fortress, and Sekandar ordered that ballistas and catapults be brought up to batter the walls. After a week of fighting, his army entered the town, and the victor gave orders that no blood was to be spilled. One of Qaydafeh's sons, Qaydafeh, was married to Ferrand's daughter, and was in the city as his father-in-law delighted in his company. Qaydafeh and his wife, however, had been captured by a man named Shahnameh. Sekandar knew of this and looked for some way to free them. He summoned his vizier, a wise and reasonable man named Qaydafeh, and showed him his crown and throne, saying, "Qaydafeh and his bride will come before you, and I shall call you Sekandar, the son of Filquis. You will be seated by the throne here like the king, and I will stand ready to serve you. You will give orders that Qaydafeh's head is to be severed from his shoulders by the executioner. I will humble myself before you and plead for them. You will clear the audience hall of courtiers, and when I redouble my pleas, you will grant my request." The vizier was very troubled by all of this, as he was unsure what it meant. Sekandar continued, "This business must remain secret. Call me in as an envoy and talk a little about Qaydafeh. Then cordially send me off to her with 10 horsemen, saying, 'Hurry and take this letter and bring me the answer.'" Qaydafeh replied, "I will do it. I'll carry out this deception according to your orders." Dawn came. The sun drew its glittering dagger, and night fled away in fear. Qaydafeh sat on the royal throne, but there was shame in his face and anxiety in his heart. Sekandar stood before him as a servant. He had closed the doors to the court and opened the doors to the deception. When Shahnameh led into Qaydafeh's weeping son as a captive, together with his young and beautiful wife, who was wringing her hands in grief, Qaydafeh quickly said, "Who is this man? Who has cause to weep so much?" The young man answered, "Come to your senses. I am Qaydafeh's son, and this is Ferrand's daughter, my sole wife. I wish to take her home and cherish her like my own soul, but I am a prisoner in Shahnameh's hands, my soul wounded by the stars, my body by arrows." When Qaydafeh heard him, he was distressed and angry. He started up and said to the executioner, "These two must be buried beneath the dust. Cut off their heads with your Indian sword now, just as they are in chains here." Sekandar came forward and kissed the ground and said, "Oh, great king of royal lineage, if you will free them for my sake, I shall be able to hold my head up in any company. Why would you vengefully cut off their head of innocent people? The world's creator will not look well on this." Wise Qaydafeh answered him, "You have freed these two from death. And Qaydafeh," he added, "you've kept your head, which was already leaving your shoulders. Now I shall send you and this man who has interceded for you to your mother, and he can explain what has happened. It would be good if she would then send us tribute. This would mean that no one will lose his skin in this quarrel. Look after this vizier of mine, who will offer your mother war with me or prosperity. Act well toward him, as he has done towards you, and since the nobleman's heart is moved to repay kindness, when he was received the queen's answer, send him safely back to me." Qaydafeh replied, "I will not take my heart or ears or eyes from him. How could I treat him otherwise, since he was here to restore me to my wife, my soul, the living sweetness of my life?" Sekandar selected 10 suitable companions from among the Greeks. They were all privy to his identity, and willingly to keep his secret. He said to them, "On this journey, address me as Qaydafeh." Qaydafeh led the group, and Sekandar watched him and listened to him attentively. Their splendid horses galloped forward like fire, and the travelers came to a mountain made all of crystal, yet with fruit trees and many plants growing on its slopes. They continued into the queen's realm, and when Qaydafeh heard that her son, about whom she had been anxiously seeking news, was approaching, she went out to welcome him with a large escort of nobles. As soon as Cædres saw his mother, he dismounted and made his obeisance before her. She told him to remount as they rode on together. She grasped his hand in hers. Cædres told her all that he had seen and heard, and he turned pale as he described his suffering in Pharaon's city, and how he was now bereft of his crown, his throne, his army, and his wealth. And he added, "This man who has come with us saved me and my bride's lives. If he had not intervened, Sekandar would have ordered that my head be cut off and my body burned. Treat him well, and don't hold back with excuses that would make me break my promise to him." Hearing her son's words, Qaydafeh was distraught with grief. She had the messenger summoned from her palace where he had been installed, and motioned him to a fine throne. She questioned him closely, and made much of him, and saw that a special residence was set aside for his stay. Then she sent fine foods, clothes, and carpets. At dawn the next morning, Sekandar made his way to the court to talk with the queen. Servants drew the curtains aside and let his horse enter. He stared in wonder at Qaydafeh on her ivory throne, with her crown studded with rubies and turquoise, wearing a Chinese cloak woven with gold. Her many serving girls, their necklaces and earrings standing around her, her face shining like the sun, her throne supported by crystal columns, her gold dress woven with jewels and clasped with precious black and white Yamani stones. Under his breath, he called on God repeatedly. He saw that her throne alone surpassed anything that Greece or Persia could provide. He came forward, and he kissed the ground, like a man anxious to make a good impression. Qaydafeh encouraged him by asking a number of questions. Then, like the sun passing from the dome of the sky, she declared that the audience for strangers was over, and summoned a meal, wine, and musicians. Tables made of teak and inlaid with gold on an ivory ground were brought in. Various kinds of food were served, and wine was set out for when they had finished eating. Qaydafeh herself, and then she drank more deeply. The queen began to look closely at Sekandar. She said to her steward, "Bring me that shining silk with the charming face painted on it. Bring it quickly, just as it is. Don't stand there wringing your hands. Go!" The steward brought the cloth and laid it before her. She stared at it for a long time, and then looked at Sekandar's face. She saw no difference between them. Qaydafeh knew that her guest was the Greek king and the commander of his armies, and that he had made himself his own messenger, and bravely came into her presence. She said to him, "You seem a man well favored by fortune. Tell me, what message does Sekandar give to you?" And he replied, "The world's king spoke to me in the presence of our nobles. He said to tell the pure-hearted Qaydafeh, 'Pursue only honesty. Pay attention to what I say, and do not turn your head aside from my orders. If your heart harbors any rebellion, I shall bring my army against you that will break it in pieces. I have found evidence of your greatness, and I have not hurried to declare war on you. Wisdom and modesty are yours, and your subtle policies maintain the world in safety. If you willingly pay me tribute, you need have no fear of me. If you refuse to go to the way of rebellion and disaster, you will see from me nothing but kindness and righteousness.'" Qaydafeh was infuriated when she heard this, but she thought the silence was the best policy. She said, "Go to your quarters now and rest with your companions. When you come to me tomorrow, I shall give you my answer and some good advice for your return journey." Sekandar went to the building that had been assigned to him, and spent the night considering what he should do. When the world's lamp appeared above the mountain tops, and the plains and foothills took on the appearance of glittering brocade, Sekandar made his way to Qaydafeh's court. Her lips were full of smiles, his heart of grief and anxiety. The chancellor recognized him as the foreign envoy, and after questioning him, led him into the queen's presence. The audience hall was full of strangers. The queen's throne was crystal patterned with agates and emeralds surrounding gems of royal worth. Its base was sandal and aloes wood, and it rested on pillars studded with turquoise. Sekandar was astonished at the splendor and the glory he saw, and he thought, "This is indeed a throne room. No God-fearing man ever saw its like." He came forward to the queen and was directed to a subsidiary golden throne. Qaydafeh said to him, "Well, Bitquin, why are you staring in this way? Is it that Greece can't produce the like of what you see here in my humble country?" Sekandar replied, "Your Majesty, you should not speak contemptuously of this palace. It is far more glorious than the palace of other kings, and seems like a mine of precious stones." Qaydafeh laughed at his reaction, and she felt delight in her heart that she was able to tease him in this way. Then she cleared the court and motioned the envoy to come closer to her. She said to him, "Filquus, son, I see your fashion for battles and royal banquets, peace and war." Sekandar turned pale at her words, and then blushed violently. His soul was filled with distress. He said, "Wise queen, such words are not worthy of you. I am Bitquin. Don't say that I am son of Filquus. I give thanks to God that there is no one of noble lineage here, because if he reported what you said to my king, my soul would soon be separated from my body." Qaydafeh replied, "Enough excuses. If with your own eyes you see yourself, then you must recognize the truth of what I say, and don't attempt either to lie or to treat me with contempt." Then she produced the silk with the charming face painted upon it and laid it before him. If the painted face had moved at all, you would have said that it was Sekandar himself. If Sekandar saw it, he nervously chewed his lower lip, and he frowned as dark as a night for him. He said, "A man should never go out in the world without a hidden dagger." Qaydafeh answered, "If you had your sword belt on and stood before me with a dagger, you'd neither the strength nor the adequate sword, nor a place to fight, nor a means of escape." Sekandar said, "A noble and ambitious man should not flinch at danger. A low-minded person will never rise in the world. If I had my arms and armor here, all your palace would be a sea of blood. I'd have to kill you or rip open your belly in front of those who hate me." Qaydafeh laughed at his blustering manliness and his angry words. She said, "Oh, lion-like king, don't let yourself be led astray by your male pride. The Indian king Four wasn't killed because of your glory, and neither were Dara and the heroes of Sind. Their good fortune was at an end, and yours was in ascendant. And now you're so full of your manly valor because you've become the greatest man on earth at the moment. But you should know that all good things come from God, and while you live, you should be grateful to him. You say the world is yours because of your knowledge, but what you say does not seem true to me. What will knowledge avail you when you go into the maw of the dragon death? Acting as your own envoy is sowing your shroud while you are still young. I am not in the habit of shedding blood, nor of attacking rulers. When a monarch has power and is merciful and just, that is when he becomes knowledgeable. Know that whoever spills a king's blood will see nothing but fire as his reward. Be assured of your safety, and leave here with joy. But when you have gone, change your habits. Don't go acting as your own messenger again, because even the dust knows that you are Sekandar. And I'm not aware of any great hero whose portrait I don't possess. Store it away with a reliable courtier. While you remain here, I will call you Bitquin, and seat you at the court accordingly, so that no one will guess your secret or your name. I will send you on your way in safety, but you, my lord, must be reasonable, and swear that you will never plot against my son, my country, or any of my people or allies, and that you will refer to me only as your equal, as the ruler of my own country." Freed from the threat of being killed, Sekandar rejoiced to hear her words. He swore by the just God, by the Christian faith, and by the dust of battle, that he would act only kindly and righteously toward her land, her son, and her noble allies, and that he would never plot their destruction. When she had heard his oath, Qaydafeh said, "There is one other piece of advice that should be kept from you. Know that when my son Tainesh has little sense and pays scant attention to my knowledge and advice, He is For's son-in-law, and he must not in any way suspect that you and Sekandar occupy the same skin, or even that you are friends. He is eager to avenge For, and to confound the earth and sky in war. Now go joyfully and safely to your quarters, and have no more fear of the world's sorrows. And here's where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back tomorrow with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friend,